The alien forces arrived in Earth's orbit, their massive fleet casting a shadow over continents. They peered down, watching the cities and fields with a mix of amusement and contempt. Earth wasn't advanced enough to pose any threat to them. Its weapons seemed primitive compared to the vast arsenal they possessed. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans could imagine. They had laser cannons capable of decimating entire planets, shields that could withstand meteors, and armor that rendered them nearly indestructible. To them, Earth's weapons were no more than relics, outdated by eons. As they observed further, their laughter grew. Images of Earth's defenses, tanks, jets, and worst of all, small firearms, were displayed across their screens. The sight of human soldiers holding rifles, clad in simple uniforms, was almost laughable. Some aliens joked that they'd be doing humanity a favor by upgrading their weaponry after they'd conquered it. Others sneered, saying the humans would be better off surrendering rather than attempting to defend themselves with such insignificant arms. The command center buzzed with energy as they prepared for the ground invasion. The alien soldiers were confident, bordering on arrogant. This was merely a mission of conquest, a routine procedure they had carried out countless times across the galaxy. To them, Earth was another unremarkable target, and its people were unaware of what awaited them. These beings had fought civilizations with weapons that could bend light and manipulate matter. They had conquered empires with defenses far superior to anything Earth could offer. In their minds, this would be over in hours, perhaps even minutes. But as they made final preparations, they picked up traces of conversations among Earth's military channels, intercepted radio signals filled with rumors of a lone defender in remote areas. The term, Gunslinger, came up several times, carrying a strange weight. The aliens were puzzled. A gunslinger? They brushed it off as folklore, a desperate legend humans clung to in times of fear. The idea that a single individual with a weapon, a firearm, of all things, could stand against their advanced army was absurd. They laughed, louder this time, mocking the foolish tales humans spread among themselves. The aliens assigned a team to land in a rural area, testing Earth's defenses by targeting a region they believed would offer little resistance. They viewed this as a minor skirmish, a way to warm up before the main conquest. Their leader, an alien with scarred skin and a sneer, directed his soldiers with a wave, signaling the beginning of the end for humanity. Their landing craft descended swiftly, kicking up clouds of dust as they touched down in fields where there was little sign of life. As the doors of the landing craft opened, the soldiers stepped out, their advanced armor gleaming in the sunlight. They spread out, moving through the area with the casual confidence of hunters stalking prey. The landscape was silent, seemingly empty. They scanned the surroundings, expecting nothing more than frightened villagers or perhaps a few scattered defenders with outdated firearms. Their initial steps were slow, almost leisurely, as they scanned the area, fully believing there was no one who could challenge them. But the silence was unsettling, almost unnerving. They had expected chaos, resistance, perhaps cries of fear from humans rushing to flee. Instead, there was only an unnatural calm. The alien soldiers exchanged glances, their initial confidence dimming slightly, though none would admit it aloud. One soldier muttered something about the gunslinger, recalling the intercepted human transmissions. But his companion laughed, dismissing it as more human fantasy. Yet, there was an undercurrent of tension now, a flicker of doubt. They continued forward, spreading out in formation, their weapons ready but held loosely. The leader, trying to keep the atmosphere light, cracked a joke about humans and their tiny toys. His laughter echoed briefly, but then faded into the silence around them. They noticed a figure in the distance, standing alone. It was a human, but not one like they'd imagined. He wasn't cowering or running. He stood tall, calm, hands resting near his sides. He was almost still, as if he'd been waiting for them. The aliens froze, not because they were afraid, but out of sheer surprise. This lone figure, facing them with nothing but a firearm at his hip, seemed absurdly confident. The alien leader grinned, signaling his soldiers forward. He didn't need to give them orders, they knew what to do. This would be a quick victory, a chance to show this gunslinger just how outmatched he was. As the soldiers advanced, the figure didn't move. His stance was unchanging, his gaze fixed on them with an intensity they hadn't expected. One alien soldier called out, mocking the human's weapon, calling it a relic. The aliens laughed again, their voices mingling with the slight rustle of wind. To them, this was a formality, a predictable encounter that would end in moments. They continued forward, fully intending to wipe out this human and any remaining defenders. Then, without warning, the human reached for his weapon. In an instant, he fired, and the sound cut through the air. The first shot rang out, and one of the alien soldiers dropped. There was a pause, a brief moment of disbelief. The aliens hadn't even registered what had happened before another shot echoed, and another soldier fell. This time, the laughter died. The remaining aliens stared at the fallen, unable to process what they were seeing. One alien soldier yelled an order, raising his weapon to fire. But before he could, the human's gun blazed again. Another soldier fell. The aliens were stunned. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They had advanced armor, technology that should have made them invulnerable to such primitive weapons. Yet here they were, falling one by one to a man with a firearm that they'd dismissed as a toy. The leader, his face twisted in shock and anger, barked orders, trying to rally his troops. But the soldiers hesitated. Their confidence had been shattered. The human wasn't retreating, or even flinching. Each time he pulled the trigger, another alien dropped, his shots precise and lethal. They had underestimated him, and now, facing the consequences, their arrogance turned to fear. As they regrouped, the aliens realized this was not the quick victory they had imagined. The figure before them, this gunslinger, was more than a human with a weapon. He was a force, unyielding and deadly. The air around them felt charged, tense, as if the land itself bore witness to their folly. The aliens, once so confident, now found themselves questioning everything they had assumed about Earth and its defenders. The aliens, still reeling from the initial encounter, regrouped with a renewed determination to overcome this lone human obstacle. Their leader, now furious and eager to salvage his bruised pride, ordered another wave forward. The soldiers advanced with caution, their previous confidence replaced by a creeping sense of dread. The laughter and mocking were gone. Now they moved in tense silence, wary of the gunslinger's precise aim and seemingly impossible speed. As they moved forward, the figure in the distance remained still, unfazed by their numbers. His calm stance was unnerving. This was not a man facing certain death. He stood there as if he had already won. The aliens, though equipped with advanced technology and nearly impenetrable armor, couldn't ignore the fear beginning to creep into their minds. They had never encountered a foe like this, a single human who could wield such a primitive weapon with such devastating effect. The next soldier in line, emboldened by his leader's orders, stepped forward, his weapon raised and ready. He shouted a command, hoping to intimidate the human into surrender. But the gunslinger made no move to yield. With a single, swift motion, he raised his firearm and fired. The alien soldier's body crumpled to the ground before he could even process what had happened. His comrades froze, their minds racing to comprehend how such a simple weapon could bypass their sophisticated defenses so effortlessly. One by one, the alien soldiers found themselves caught in a deadly rhythm. Each step forward was met with a shot, each shot with a fallen soldier. They tried to counter, firing rounds of energy blasts that scorched the air around them. Yet their target remained untouched. The gunslinger's movements were minimal, almost mechanical, each shot finding its mark with unerring accuracy. The aliens were unprepared for this kind of warfare. Their strategies, honed against countless other enemies, were failing them here. They realized they weren't facing a mere human. They were up against something far more dangerous. As more of their soldiers fell, the alien leader's rage turned to desperation. He commanded his troops to spread out, hoping to overwhelm the gunslinger from multiple angles. Yet this too proved futile. The gunslinger anticipated their moves, his shots meeting them from every direction. There was no hesitation in his movements, no faltering. He was in control, and the aliens were merely following his lead in this deadly dance. Panic began to set in among the ranks, their once perfect formation now breaking down into chaos. In the midst of this turmoil, the aliens became painfully aware of their own limitations. They had relied too heavily on their advanced weaponry, believing it to be their ultimate shield. Now, stripped of that confidence, they were forced to confront the reality that their technology couldn't protect them against skill, precision, and sheer resolve. The gunslinger's weapon may have been simple, but in his hands, it was a tool of unmatched destruction. The leader, watching his forces dwindle, realized the true depth of his mistake. His arrogance had blinded him to the real threat before them. This wasn't just a human with a gun, this was a master, someone who had honed his craft to perfection. The leader's thoughts raced as he tried to devise a strategy, any strategy, to counter the gunslinger's devastating attacks. But every idea crumbled under the weight of their losses. The gunslinger was too fast, too accurate, and most disturbingly, too calm. The alien soldiers, once proud warriors of an unstoppable force, were now little more than targets. Each one of them knew it, and that knowledge eroded their morale. They had come here as conquerors, but now they were little more than prey. The realization that a single human could bring them to this point was humiliating, yet undeniable. They could no longer see him as a mere obstacle. He was a nightmare they couldn't escape, a specter haunting their every move. As the battle raged on, the alien soldiers began to falter. They hesitated before stepping forward, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. The fear in their eyes was palpable. They knew that any attempt to close the distance would be met with lethal precision. Their advanced armor, which had once been a symbol of their superiority, felt like a prison trapping them within his line of sight. Every clank of their boots on the ground sounded like a death knell. The gunslinger's gaze remained steady, unblinking. To him, this was not a battle to win but a duty to uphold. He was a protector, a defender of his land. And these aliens, with all their advanced weaponry and arrogance, had underestimated the strength of that conviction. They thought they could crush Earth's defenses with ease, but they hadn't accounted for someone like him. His resolve was unbreakable, his skill unmatched. Finally, the remaining soldiers began to pull back, retreating under the gunslinger's relentless assault. They could no longer see a path to victory. Every step forward only led to more losses, and the weight of those losses had become too much to bear. Their leader shouted for them to stand their ground, but even he could see the fear in their eyes. They were broken, their spirits crushed by a force they couldn't understand. The retreat was chaotic, a far cry from the proud, disciplined march they had begun with. They stumbled over each other, scrambling to get out of the gunslinger's line of sight. Their weapons, once symbols of power, now felt like dead weight in their hands. They had come to Earth with confidence, certain of their superiority. But in the face of the gunslinger's unyielding will, they had been reduced to nothing. As they withdrew, they couldn't shake the image of that lone figure standing firm, unshaken by their weapons or their numbers. He had defied their expectations, shattered their pride, and shown them a side of humanity they hadn't anticipated. The alien forces, now regrouping further from the gunslinger, began to realize that brute force and simple numbers would not be enough. This single human had shattered their earlier confidence and had revealed cracks in their strategy. For the first time, they began to consider a calculated approach, one that did not simply rely on the overwhelming strength of their technology. Their weapons and armor, though formidable against most enemies, seemed helpless against this man's skill and precision. It was not just that he could shoot accurately, it was as though he knew their every move before they made it. They gathered their most elite soldiers, those trained to handle unexpected threats, and briefed them on their mission. The order was clear: take out the gunslinger by any means necessary. This group was specially trained, experienced in complex combat scenarios. They had weapons and tactics honed for chaotic situations. Each soldier held the rank of a highly skilled operative, confident in their ability to adapt and strike with precision. Yet, as they prepared to move forward, a sense of unease lingered. The memory of their comrades falling so easily was fresh, and they couldn't ignore it. They moved in cautiously, splitting into small units to approach from multiple angles. Every step was calculated, their movements rehearsed to avoid giving the gunslinger a clear line of sight. Their plan was to close in on him, utilizing the surrounding terrain to their advantage, hoping to neutralize his range advantage. They adjusted their formation, ensuring no gaps that might leave them exposed. Each operative moved with purpose, gripping their advanced weapons, scanning the area with an intensity that betrayed their nerves. This time, they would not underestimate their target. Yet, as they neared, the air itself seemed tense, charged with an invisible force. Each alien could feel it, a pressure that grew stronger the closer they came to the gunslinger. It wasn't something they could identify, but it was there, a sense that they were stepping into a trap, not one laid by physical means, but by the sheer aura of the man who stood against them. It was unsettling, a reminder that their previous assumptions about this human's limitations were flawed. He was no ordinary defender. The elite soldiers continued their advance, confident in their new approach but increasingly aware of a creeping doubt. Their leader urged them forward, reminding them of their training and their mission. They refocused, reassuring themselves that this time would be different, that with their numbers and strategy, the gunslinger would have no chance. They inched closer, weapons ready, every movement deliberate. As they closed in, they saw flashes of movement, just subtle shifts in the shadows where he might be hiding. They aimed and fired, sending volleys of energy into those shadows. But each time, they hit nothing. It was as if the man was everywhere and nowhere at once, anticipating their attacks and slipping through their formations with ease. Their careful strategy, the one that had seemed so foolproof just moments before, began to unravel. They had split up to trap him, but instead, they found themselves isolated, vulnerable. In moments, they began to fall. One by one, the gunslinger's shots cut through the silence, each sound followed by the collapse of an elite soldier. They could barely react before another shot rang out, and another one of their team was lost. The gunslinger moved unseen, each shot perfectly timed, finding their weaknesses despite their best efforts to avoid him. Their armor, designed to withstand the most powerful weaponry in the galaxy, seemed to offer no protection. Panic spread among the remaining operatives. They tried to regroup, signaling for support, but there was no time. Every movement felt slow, every reaction a fraction too late. The gunslinger's aim was flawless, his timing impeccable. It was as though he controlled the entire field, dictating their every move, luring them into his sights one by one. The elite soldiers, once so sure of their victory, were now scrambling, desperate to survive. Their leader, watching from a distance, saw his team fall and realized the gravity of their mistake. He had led them into a situation where their training, their technology, their tactics, all were rendered useless against a single, unwavering foe. He saw that this human, this gunslinger, was something they hadn't accounted for. His presence, his skill, went beyond anything their forces had prepared to face. The leader had sent his best soldiers, and now they were nothing but casualties. Finally, he made the call to retreat. It was a bitter decision, one that cut deeply into his pride and authority. But he knew that continuing this fight was futile. The gunslinger was not a foe they could defeat with tactics or technology. This was a battle that required something else, something the aliens lacked. They pulled back, their ranks depleted and their spirits crushed, each alien now painfully aware of the cost of their arrogance. The surviving soldiers regrouped at a distance, exchanging silent glances, their expressions dark with the weight of defeat. None of them spoke of what had happened, but each knew that they had been bested in a way they could barely understand. This was not just a loss on the battlefield, it was a blow to their very perception of superiority. They had underestimated humanity, and in doing so, they had encountered a force beyond their comprehension. As they retreated, the image of the gunslinger lingered in their minds. They would not forget him, nor the lesson he had taught them. He was a defender they could neither match nor escape, a reminder that in their quest for conquest, they had overlooked the strength and resolve that lay in their path. The alien commanders, observing the failures of their forces, understood that they were dealing with an exceptional threat. This human gunslinger had single-handedly defeated entire squads with a skill and precision that defied explanation. Now, they were done with half measures and uncoordinated attacks. They gathered their most elite warriors, those trained not just for combat but for scenarios where superior intelligence and reflexes were essential. This human, they decided, would face their best, and they were determined that he would not survive. The commanders selected warriors with armor enhanced beyond anything standard troops wore, capable of withstanding direct hits from high-caliber weaponry. These soldiers were seasoned, experienced in battles that demanded a high level of adaptability and resilience. They were also equipped with specialized weapons, each designed for fast, lethal engagements. The goal was no longer to simply defeat this gunslinger but to annihilate him in such a way that he would become a symbol of futility to Earth's defenses. They prepared mentally and physically, adjusting their strategy for a foe who had proven to be anything but ordinary. The commanders crafted a plan based on swift, overpowering force combined with relentless precision. Each elite warrior was briefed to attack with coordinated, unpredictable patterns, covering all possible escape routes. They planned every move meticulously, analyzing every recorded detail of the gunslinger's movements to exploit any weakness they could find. Each elite was instructed to adapt instantly to any deviation in the human's tactics. Their orders were clear: strike fast, adapt constantly, and above all, never allow him a single moment to breathe or counter. They were to close in, neutralize, and eliminate with no hesitation. When they were ready, they advanced with a focused determination, moving with a unity that betrayed no uncertainty. Each alien knew that this mission was about restoring their pride, redeeming their losses, and proving that their strength and discipline were unmatched. This was not just a mission, it was a test of their dominance, and the thought of failure was inconceivable. The idea that a lone human could continue to defy them fueled a fierce resolve among their ranks. Failure had already cost them too much, and this time, they were determined to secure victory at any cost. As they began their approach, the commanders reinforced their ranks with enhanced shields, ensuring they could withstand multiple direct hits. They carried weapons designed for maximum impact, advanced energy rifles with targeting systems that tracked movement with pinpoint accuracy. Their armor was coated with materials that absorbed and deflected most projectiles, rendering them nearly impervious to traditional firearms. Each commander led their troops with a calculated confidence, believing they had finally found the perfect strategy to crush this seemingly unstoppable foe. The entire operation was timed with precision, with the commanders coordinating each movement to keep the gunslinger off balance and under constant threat. Their strategy relied on relentless pressure, on forcing the human into a corner with no exit. They communicated through a seamless network, adjusting their formation instantly with every shift in the gunslinger's position. Their discipline and unity created an unbreakable wall, and they moved with a precision that left no room for errors or delays. But as they advanced, something unexpected happened. Despite their flawless strategy and perfect coordination, the gunslinger's response remained swift and effective. Each attempt to corner him was met with a counter that defied their expectations. He moved with an awareness that seemed almost supernatural, anticipating their every move as if he had seen their plans in advance. His shots continued to find their marks, bypassing their defenses with unnerving accuracy. The commanders began to realize that no matter how much they adjusted, he remained one step ahead. The elite soldiers, though well-trained, began to falter. For every carefully coordinated strike, the gunslinger had a counter. Every time they thought they had him pinned, he slipped through their ranks, turning their own strategy against them. The commanders pushed harder, increasing the pace of their attacks, but it only served to highlight the gunslinger's skill. He remained calm, unflinching, and focused, adapting to their movements with a precision they couldn't match. As the battle dragged on, the commanders faced an unsettling truth: their tactics, their advanced weaponry, and their elite training were proving ineffective against this human. They had underestimated not just his skill but his ability to disrupt even their most sophisticated plans. The initial confidence they had felt was replaced by a creeping frustration, a realization that this gunslinger was not simply reacting, he was controlling the battlefield. His presence dictated their every move, forcing them into positions they hadn't anticipated and exposing vulnerabilities they had believed impossible. Despite their best efforts, their ranks began to thin. One by one, elite soldiers fell, each defeat a reminder of the human's unyielding precision and strength. The commanders, now desperate to end this, ordered their troops to take more aggressive measures. They abandoned caution, focusing all their power on a final, full-force assault intended to overpower him once and for all. But this only served to hasten their defeat. In their desperation, they lost the careful coordination that had initially defined their strategy, and the gunslinger exploited this breakdown without mercy. The commanders, once the epitome of discipline and strength, found themselves exposed. Their elite troops, their technology, their intricate plans, all had fallen before a single human who wielded nothing more than a weapon they had dismissed as obsolete. The gunslinger's control of the battlefield was absolute, and their final assault crumbled under his unrelenting counterattacks. Each fallen soldier was a testament to the flaw in their assumptions, to the hubris that had led them to believe they could easily overpower Earth's defenders. As the last of the elite forces fell, the commanders faced the crushing realization they had lost. Their ranks lay scattered, defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by a single human with an indomitable will. The gunslinger had taken everything they had thrown at him and had emerged victorious, untouched by their mightiest efforts. They had underestimated him, and now they paid the price, their forces broken, their pride shattered. In the end, the alien commanders stood defeated, their arrogance and assumptions dismantled by a foe they could never have anticipated. This was no mere human, he was a force, a symbol of resilience that they had not understood and could not overcome. They retreated, their spirits crushed, knowing that they had encountered something beyond their understanding, a strength and determination that could not be conquered, no matter how powerful their technology or how advanced their strategies. The alien forces, defeated at every turn, had no choice but to acknowledge the depth of their failure. Their once flawless tactics, advanced weaponry, and formidable elite units had all fallen to a single human, a figure they had initially mocked. The humiliation was as complete as it was unexpected. They had assumed their superiority over Earth was absolute, that their technology and numbers would crush any resistance effortlessly. But this human gunslinger had not only defeated them, he had dismantled their confidence, exposing their vulnerability in a way they couldn't ignore. As they regrouped, every remaining soldier bore the weight of defeat. The leaders, once proud and confident in their vision of conquest, could no longer deny the gravity of their miscalculation. This battle had taken a toll that went beyond simple casualties. It had shaken the foundation of their beliefs, challenging their assumption that Earth's defenses were weak and inconsequential. Each alien understood now that they were facing not just a defender of Earth, but an embodiment of resilience they hadn't accounted for. They hadn't just failed, they had been humbled. The decision to retreat was not made lightly. To abandon their mission and withdraw from Earth was a blow to their pride and authority. They had arrived with grand visions of domination and had been forced to recognize the limits of their strength. There was no glory in retreating, no honor in admitting that a single human had held his ground against them. But to continue would be suicidal. Every plan, every attempt to counter him had been met with a precision and calm that they could not overcome. They were left with no viable choice but to concede. As they began their retreat, each alien soldier moved with a heaviness that came from knowing they had underestimated their enemy. The sight of the gunslinger's shadow still haunted them, a figure who had not wavered, who had stood as an immovable force against everything they had unleashed. They retreated not just from a battlefield but from a reminder of their own limitations, their own arrogance. This was a defeat that would be remembered, a lesson in the dangers of underestimating an opponent. Back aboard their ships, the atmosphere was grim. The tales of this battle would spread among their ranks, stories of a lone human with a weapon they deemed inconsequential, standing unbreakable against their finest forces. The alien leaders knew that the impact of this defeat would reach far beyond Earth's orbit. Their empire, accustomed to victory, would be forced to confront the reality that even a small planet like Earth could hold dangers they hadn't anticipated. They had treated this conquest as routine, a minor objective in their grand campaign. But this loss forced them to reconsider everything. Reflecting on the battle, they realized that the gunslinger had not been merely defending territory. He had been defending something much deeper. It was clear now that he represented not just Earth, but an unyielding determination that transcended any technological advantage. He had revealed the aliens' vulnerability, exploiting their overconfidence with a simplicity they hadn't understood. His weapon, which they had once mocked, had become a symbol of their failure. They saw now that technology alone could not compensate for a lack of respect, that strength required more than advanced weaponry. In their defeat, the alien leaders began to question their methods and assumptions. They had underestimated the human spirit, the resolve that allowed one person to stand against overwhelming odds. They had assumed that Earth's defenses would fall as easily as countless others had. But this gunslinger had shattered that belief, forcing them to reevaluate not only their approach to conquest but their understanding of resilience and strength. The battle had taught them that there were forces they could not quantify, elements of human resolve that went beyond logic or technology. As they departed, the memory of the gunslinger became a symbol within their ranks. He was not a threat in the conventional sense, yet he represented an unassailable force that they could neither conquer nor comprehend. The gunslinger's actions would serve as a warning to their empire, a reminder that strength could take many forms, that courage and skill could outweigh even the most advanced technology. They had encountered something they had not prepared for, a warrior who embodied the idea that some things were worth defending with everything one had, and who had the skill to make that defense formidable. The aliens, now fully aware of their limits, left Earth's orbit with a silence that spoke volumes. They had not conquered this world, they had been bested by it. The experience would resonate across their empire, a cautionary tale of arrogance and underestimation. They had come to Earth believing themselves invincible, only to learn that power without respect and understanding could lead to defeat. Their technology, which had carried them to countless victories, had proven inadequate against a defender who needed nothing more than skill, conviction, and a weapon they had once dismissed as primitive. As they retreated into the vastness of space, the image of the gunslinger remained vivid in their minds. He was a figure they would not forget, a symbol of Earth's resilience that would echo throughout their ranks. This battle would be remembered as the day they were forced to confront the limits of their power. Their empire, though vast and mighty, had been humbled by a single human who stood his ground and refused to yield. They knew now that Earth was not a planet to be taken lightly. It was a place where defenders emerged with a strength that transcended any calculation, any prediction. This was a lesson they would carry forward, an experience that would shape their future encounters and strategies. They would spread tales of the gunslinger, a solitary figure who had changed their perception of strength and honor, forcing them to recognize the power of an enemy they had once dismissed. Their return to their own empire would be marked by silence and reflection. The gunslinger had become more than just a defender, he had become a legend in their eyes, a symbol of what they could not conquer. They had arrived with laughter and left in silence, a silence filled with respect and understanding of the resilience they had encountered. Earth, once a mere conquest, was now a place marked in their history as the site of a defeat that had redefined their understanding of power. And in their retreat, they carried with them the indelible memory of a lone human who had stood against them and had won.